Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and welcome back to another special office hours. This one is it's gonna be so much fun. I'm really excited for this conversation. Obviously, if you guys have been tuning in this week, you've noticed it's a little bit of a different week because we launched the Neve 1084 UAD plugin. And as you guys have hopefully already seen or heard for yourselves, like 1084 gives you that classic Neve sound, but with an even more flexible EQ. So instead of me just sitting here and talking about how great of a plugin and how cool this EQ is and just geeking out on it, I thought it'd be a lot of fun this week to bring on a bunch of our UA artists and friends and family. And this afternoon, I'm joined by Mr. Jimmy Douglas, the Senator. How you doing,
Hey,
sir?
hey,
How's it going down there?
it's going fine down here in Miami.
Is it? I assume the weather is always nice, right? The weather is not affected by the quarantine, but no one can go enjoy it.
You're all right.
So you've been
You just
staying.
feel like it's always lurking around the corner,
So staying safe and staying in the studio, keeping busy.
trying to do that. Yep, stay in the studio. Yeah.
hmm Nice. Well, man. So with the 1084, we got you a copy of that a couple of weeks ago, and you actually helped us make some presets for it. So you've had some hands-on time with it. For people who are kind of new to like the Neve, Neve versus API or SSL, like I think a great place to start this conversation is like how do you choose when to go for what type of preamp or EQ? There's so many options. How do you choose to go with something like the Neve?
Um, Something like the Neve, I think of in the purest form. I think I go back to the '70s and the '80s in my mind, and I go, "This is what the ultimate sound was sounding like." It's like the Rolls Royce of sound of that era,
hmm
and it really hasn't been surpassed, as I know. And I go, "You want that thick, just round sound?
Yeah.
Just makes everything just feel comfortable."
Mm. Yep. And you can get that just by passing stuff through it too, right? And that's even before you start shaping with it.
Exactly, exactly. That's why you would pick it up and use it.
hmm So how'd do you I can't remember, do you have some 1084s in your studio or are you
I
just
had
use
a, I had a bunch of them, and I found that when I got rid of my console, I decided I'm not really doing a lot of the outboard thing anymore. So
hmm
took the time to turn it into plugins. Well,
go all in the box? Nice. So
yeah.
how'd you did the UAD 1084, did it bring back some memories? Did it, sonically just overall kind of feel like how you remember it?
Yeah, I convinced myself that it really felt like the real thing.
hmm
The GUI's really nice, so it makes you feel like, oh, it's that thing. And
Yeah.
even yeah, it's really it's smooth and has a couple more gain stages that I didn't have before.
hmm
Excuse me, the master fader
Yep.
and the little I call it the little round output knob on the bottom on the right.
Yeah.
Him and yeah,
Well, and it's
that's
cool too is that you brought it up so nicely there. Like, so yeah, the this plugin version of it emulates all the gain stages of the original Neve. So obviously the big red knob, that's where the majority of that color and gain stage is. But even the fader that's in the plugin, that's not a perfectly linear fader. That is modeling what the original faders were doing in the amplifier circuit that was attached to the fader. So then the reason that's the reason why you have both the fader and also that knob at the bottom. The knob at the bottom, that one's a digital trim. So, exactly.
yeah,
So that one's fully transparent. But that it's kind of cool that the fader on there, it's pretty much linear, but it's still an analog modeling of what that fader and that circuit does.
right.
It's always I'm always surprised when we start learning about the development of these plugins of like just how deep these guys dive into the circuits and into like the gain staging of every single module. They want to model it warts and all. Like they want all the goodness and every like eccentricity of each plugin comes through. That's really cool. So the when you're we were talking with Joe Ciccarelli earlier today, and by the way, he sends his best. He wanted to make sure he was like if he could be there, he would. But we were talking a bunch about his we're kind of use his presets as a bit of a jumping off point, and one of the big topics that was coming up as we were talking about presets is like, as much as you're like, this is a Joe Ciccarelli snare drum of an EQ. He was like, yeah, like this probably works, but it's always about context. Obviously what you feed into a preset makes more of a difference than what the preset actually is. So when you're thinking of presets for plugins, like what's kind of your process? Like, do you pull up sessions and just try stuff out, or like how do you settle in on here's something that you want to share with the world?
Well, the thing is, it's really interesting. I rarely have time to just sit and play with stuff for the sake of playing with stuff.
Uh-huh.
But kind of like, I'll just kind of throw it on what I'm working on, and I'll try to just achieve certain things and see if it can keep up, basically.
Yeah.
One of the things I like in a plugin or even a piece of real piece of gear is, and I would always say this, I go, oh, this is a piece of gear that really does something.
Mm-hmm.
Subtlety is great. And by the way, this box can be subtle, but it can overdrive really pretty quickly. It depends on what you're doing with it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I kind of use them. I just kind of like, I don't know. It's making presets or plugins is a very interesting thing to me.
Yeah.
Because, I'm always usually kind of done by the time I'm going to go back and make presets, but I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need anything now.
Yeah. Right. I do that too. Like even like I'll arrive on something and be like, oh, this is great, and then like the minute you kind of feel good about something is you just your ear gets caught by the next thing, and you're like, oh yeah, I need to go work on the vocal again, or like you're always kind of jumping around the session, and you're never really sitting there like contemplating for 20 minutes on one track's tone on its own. It's always in context.
Which, by the way, I don't do when I mix anyway.
Yeah,
I really don't. I don't spend a lot of time doing that because to me, it's always how it works as the big package.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you sit and do that, the more you're begging to be sitting there for a long time.
Yep, that's a great way to really slow down the process, right? Just sit there and pontificate about every single setting or worry about it. You
also lose, but the bigger pictures, you lose perspective. That's the thing. That's the most important thing to me is like, I don't want to lose perspective because when you lose perspective, you're doing nothing at that point.
Yeah.
You become useless to the process for my money.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't know, then who does?
Mm-hmm. So like when you're pulling something up like the 1084, are you typically, are you trying to transform it? Or are you trying like what's I want to give people a kind of an idea of like how can they pull up the 1084? Actually, you know what? Let's not talk about it. Let's have you show. Let's let's actually have you share your screen and over there in the studio rig, and let's rather than just talk about this in the air, let's talk about it in some context.
Talk about it in the air. Well, okay. Let's see what I do.
In the Zoom window.
Yes.
Yep.
That didn't do it.
Oh yeah, tab over to Zoom and then Command Shift S.
There you go. What was there? Fucking thing in here. There you go.
Yep, and then enter. Boom. Got your screen. There we go. Now we're looking at the same thing. So
what a pretty screen it is.
I know. So do you typically, so say you have this loaded up on a track, do you play around with the gain stage of it first, or do you kind of kick in the EQ and get going? Like what's a good process for people to follow on?
Well, no, I mean I would follow your own process. That's one does what one does.
Mm-hmm.
I usually kind of just start with the EQ.
Mm-hmm.
That's the simplest thing to do.
Yeah.
And then because of all these different gain stages I'm being offered, I start playing with those after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what I want, like one of the things I like about this particular box a lot is I can get some nice creamy distortion that's just not digital distortion. It is digital distortion. Hello. But
yeah,
it makes me believe it ain't.
Uh-huh.
It feels more like, the old school thing, it feels like it's still smooth.
Yeah.
And I always notice that with this box and a couple of the other Neve boxes, if I go to the microphone side instead of leaving it in line, right away it overloads.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have those other two gain stages, I can drop those down, and now I'm getting some nice creamy distortion that's not actually, and that's one of the things that I look for a lot in that.
And
with
using
vocals and stuff.
mm-hmm.
Let's see, with acoustic kicks, boy, this is a whole can of worms here. Because with acoustic versus like a lot of the sample stuff and the hip hop stuff, they're totally different usages.
Mm-hmm.
So I can give you an example of a kick like this kick I'm doing in this record here, actually.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll give you a sample of the record. Just
it's here it's here in context a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of something I picked up from London.
Mm-hmm.
I start in the middle.
I had a funny feeling you wouldn't give it all to me. Sun was only sinking down beneath the deep blue sea, tainted by the waters I wish I was not to be. But I'm old now. It didn't happen easily. Let me spend my final days with you. She wouldn't take the time to save my mind. Nothing seems to come so goddamn slow.
So this thing goes on for a while.
Dude, that's so I was not expecting that much rock. That's so sick, dude. What who's this artist?
His name is Bo. Wow, I can't believe I just lost it. Bo Bowen is his name. That's because it's like a tongue twister.
Bo Bowens.
Bo Bowens. He's a young English lad, and he's in that world, man. He just loves this.
Yeah,
and
dude.
I was like, this is rock and roll.
Yeah. I mean, it has like those like classic like Ozzy sort of vibes. Yeah, that's super rad. And obviously a great mix to pull up a 1084 on, right? Like it really does lend itself to the aggression and rock and kind of thickness down there.
Yeah, so like on that kick, I got it a little thicker than I had it. I can solo it actually and show you, but
yeah,
I'll just kind of show you what this. There's so in this case, I actually raised up the master fader guy.
Yeah.
After the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I just left it in line, and I'm not really doing that much. I mean, I'm just kind of doing mid-range and I'm boosting at 60. I do everything at 60, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. And everything I've ever done is always 60. I don't know why. Well, because I used to use Neves, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the frequencies that I just fell in love with. And I learned from a lot of the English people that use Neves. They would use that 60 all the time. I was like, well, because I think in America they were using like 100.
Yeah, it was like 110 seems to be a lot of guys go to.
That was the American bottom, and I started working with these English engineers, and they would be like using the 60. I'm like, what is this 60 shit?
Mm-hmm.
Like when I worked with the Stones and stuff, I'd be down there, and I'm like, oh, okay. So that's kind of where I get my woof from, I guess. So this kick, I played pre and post this the EQ, bypass it, and I'll just solo it. Right about here. I don't know if you can hear the difference on your machine. Big ass fucking kick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. It's
Okay.
It's and then now with, let's hear
Now I'm gonna put it with. Right. It's majorly day and night. No.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, it jumps forward like 2 feet. Like it sounds like you extended the kick drum, you made it longer. Like, yeah, it gives it so much more thickness and just hair.
Enormous. And
Hmm.
I tried the same thing with the snare, but I found that I don't know if you can see. You can see there. I had to bypass it,
Hmm.
and I'll play pieces of the snare, and I was hoping to get the same sort of thing out of it, but
Yeah.
it didn't really translate. It was fine the way it was. Oh, I mean,
No, I hear you.
it was fine the way it was. Actually, I found
Yeah.
I was trying to force something. So that's another thing to know about plugins. Sometimes,
Mm.
I put a lot on. You can notice I put a lot on the things on there. They're like blued out because I tried it, but it didn't work. But I
Hmm.
leave it because I spent the energy. Maybe I'll change my mind in the heat of battle.
Yeah. Right.
So apparently that color, that color on the kick and the snare together, they were kind of competing with each other.
Hmm.
And it seemed like it was just better left alone, and it seemed to cut better. It maintained some of its thickness without getting too thin. And it could have been the frequencies I picked, but that's how I dial EQs, and I don't spend a lot of time getting very, very specific.
Hmm.
And by the way, I wanted to mention another thing about the 1084 and actually a lot of the UAD product. You don't have any curves that you can read,
Yeah. There's
and I got
no
to be
mixing with
honest
your
with you.
eyes.
I got to be honest with you. It's like having grown up touching shit.
Hmm.
There was no curve
Yep.
except your ears, and the first times I started touching digital things where I could see it, I EQ'd differently
Hmm.
because my ears weren't working anymore. My eyes were,
Yeah.
and
You start like looking at it and thinking about it and kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
you over intellectualize it in a way. Similar to what you're just saying of like, your mind may be like, man, I think this needs a 1084 just because you bought, like I used to do this all the time, especially like when I first get a plug-in or buy a new guitar, like you get something new, you think you got to use it on absolutely everything.
everything is that's correct.
Right. Just all you want to do is get the most out of it, and there's a method to that madness of like, you do want to learn the sound of it, you do want to like, you do want to bring that into your palette, you do want to understand how far you can push or where you can go. So like, when you buy something, like there's a good reason to kind of overdose on it a little bit, but then when you're working on a track or a mix or something for a client, you do have to always keep in mind, like, all right, I have this new thing I want to play with, but at the same time, is this actually serving the song? Is this
Right,
making
right.
my mix better? Or is it just making me feel more happy that in my purchase?
I also tried it on the overheads on this, and what happened was, while I like the fundamental that it was creating,
Hmm.
it was also giving me a lot more splash and a lot, the thing, honestly, there are those guys that are really good at the rock shit and they know how to get rid of all that stuff. Well, I don't do a lot of rock all the time. So like, I know the little tricks and trades of the whatever. So I'm like, okay, there's too much splash and I can't deal with it. So I guess I can't use it, but I will once again show you what it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Pull it up.
yeah, it's right down here. It's right down here. And it's on the coals, the overheads. Here we go. There we go. There's the coals. We'll put those in there. along with these guys, and we'll see what we're talking about. So with that, I was getting this. I was getting the air I wanted to get. You could hear it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you heard it pull it up, but it also kind of pulled up some of the point of like the snare and the hi-hat, like.
Yeah, and then the cymbals just, So I was like, you know what? It'll have to be okay without it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I spend a lot of time getting in there, digging in there, probably gating some frequencies, that are filtering out some frequencies that I didn't want. But there's a whole bunch of other mics I got to use too for getting away with that stuff, and that's kind of where I went with that.
So one of the things I've been asking everybody about, that's unique to the 1084 compared to like the 1073. Do you find yourself ever using the low pass feature on there?
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah. When do you pull that out?
I pull it out most of the time when I think about it, because if I'm messing with 60, it's always a little bit low, and it's always got a little bit extra artifact under there. So I usually go 45.
Okay, yeah, just like a little something just to tighten it up at the bottom a little bit.
Yeah, because I shouldn't make a statement like this, but it's hard to hear all that stuff under there. But with subwoofers these days, you can hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
But barring that, I'm just saying, who the hell's going to be listening here hearing 20?
Yeah. Well, and then what's cool about the 1084 is then you can do it from the opposite direction too. So you can you can high pass like 45, and then that low pass. Do you ever use that to kind of tame top end stuff, or you kind of leave that knob on the off position most of the time?
I will, especially in the hip hop world. I definitely will use that many times, because they don't really we don't really be utilizing a lot of those higher frequencies. Everybody's trying to make everything sound like this.
Yeah.
So, and everybody's trying to filter everything off. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, and that was as we were talking last week, getting ready for this call. One of the cool things I thought was super interesting was like thinking about, especially since you work in so many different genres and different types of music, how does the Neve, is it relevant to other genres besides rock or singer-songwriters? Like, can you pull this up in a hip-hop mix and find uses for it?
I'd pull this up and I would actually record through it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the rack, the UAD rack, that's, I'll replace what I had before with this now.
Yeah. So, so it kind of fits in every genre, but then how do you have to approach it differently when you're recording different styles of music?
The vocal part, or you mean like the playback side?
I guess both.
So for me, this is just one man's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
This particular color is a little soggy for hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
So, that I think that hopefully that describes what I mean. It's like a little bit.
It's a little slow, a little mushy, a little
slow. Exactly. It's a little mushy, yeah. And then their shit's, it's either filtered down and ugly, but it's also tight.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. But in terms of like some nice pop stuff, especially vocals, which I was going to actually show you later, I put some of this on the guy's vocal, and that was the one area that I really, really, really did not get it right.
Yeah.
And this made a big difference. And I'm not really adding or doing a lot. The thing is also, I've noticed that, I'm not doing a lot to anything. And yet when you get it right on this particular box, a little goes a long way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It really does, right? Like you can do, you think you almost, I've even found myself doing this, like feel a little self-conscious. I'm like, man, like I've turned it like a little bit, maybe I need to turn it more. And then like you're actually like, just like the little move, it can be just enough to like kind of not, you don't have to blow it out of the water, but it can add so much more, like it can add some presence to it with a very tiny move.
Right. Which I guess is a testament to their modeling, because that's how the big boys felt.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, do you want to actually? Can you pull up that vocal? I'd love to see what you did there.
Let's see what we have. Enough tracks, boys and girls.
I love that there's a track named 240 BPM.
What?
I saw one as you were scrolling by. One of those tracks was labeled 240 BPM. It's been a while since I've seen that tempo.
I'll move on. And I'm going to move on in the track to like a different movement, because this thing goes like, it has about 5 different movements in it.
That's really cool.
It's like an opera.
Uh huh.
No, but I'm gonna take the 1084s off first.
Yep.
Just so that we can hear what contribution they were making or not. First, without them. So here we go. I'm going to go back because it just goes. I'm going to go back and put them in now, so you can hear the difference that it did make. Thought it made a difference. I thought it made a difference.
I was like, I can judging by where the gain knob is. I feel like we're gonna hear a strong difference here.
Oh, that's true. I did it to basically make it more distorted.
Yeah.
You know, and then I also went into the mic side to make it overloaded.
Yep. I like to call that the danger zone. I love it. That's where I like to live.
Right.
I don't wanna take the time to fall in love again. 'Cause I don't wanna live down more. I don't wanna live to save my soul. She's counting the days, this sweet embrace, sounding the tape. When you leave me behind, don't leave me in my mind, don't leave me in my mind no more.
Dude, hey man, this is such a fun song. Like I'm having a blast over here just listening to this. Like the rock is so strong on this one, and
It's crazy, right?
it is.
So that vocal, you could hear it just brought it right up into your face.
Yeah. Well, and it gives it like added aggression. It gives it
Right.
and it's also a classic color. Like we're used to hearing that
There you go.
the grit and the extra push that you're giving to that vocal, like that's rock and roll right there. Like that's just there's no better way to describe it. Like that is kind of the sound of a super driven, really hot and crispy vocal.
Right. Which is why I say I do use it. I will use this on trying this on vocals instead of my my real preamps, but just when I say real, analog ones.
Yeah.
Because I believe that it can get that. I think it can replicate the ones that I used to have without the noise. They were always noisy, always doing crazy shit. That's the thing about the analog gear.
It works great. It sounds amazing, and then at some point in time, a transistor dies, or a capacitor starts giving up. Well, and that's
Also, there was a piano. I don't know if you heard the piano at that same point. I did leave on that one too, man.
Yeah,
and it made it pop.
Let's see, man. We got it. Let's see what you got on there. I would love to.
I have to find it.
Well, and then, man, it is really cool to show this, like, just on this vocal, like the vocal alone was already, you can tell they're well recorded. Like they took some care when they were making these, but then like getting in there after the fact and just blowing it out with that Neve gain stage sounds it just sounds sick. It's so cool.
So here's the piano, and in my and let me just see what I have on the EQ here. I'm adding a lot of low end.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's on the low, and that's like on the low side of it too. So that way, so you're kind of reinforcing the body of it. I assume.
I'm putting 700, and everybody knows you can't have 500 and set between 800 and 300. You can't have that because it's all mud. Okay, great, but I like mud. What can I say?
you're like watch me add some.
So. Yeah, I'll take it off.
Yep.
And we'll hear the same thing. So
huge difference. Oh yeah,
big difference, right?
Big old difference. I mean, it goes from it's adding that whole octave. It feels like you went from like skinny little chicken hands to like full fat fingers.
Yeah.
It does. It adds like a really great thickness to it. And that's crazy. Again, like, yeah, man, you're breaking all the rules right here. You're adding 60 to a piano, and you're adding in 700, but it's what's right is right.
I learned that from. By the way, I learned that from an English guy, Dennis Mackay is his name, an engineer, from back in the day, and I worked with him, and I watched him do this, and I'm like, he came from England. I'm thinking, what do you guys know from England? What do you mean you're putting bottom on the bottom? What are you doing? Like, and he was actually putting 60 on the top end of the piano. I'm thinking, you're insane. But when I heard it, I was like, yo, you might be on something there, bro.
Right. Well, it adds like a chestiness, and like, even when note wise, right, a lot of the fundamentals of those notes are above that. It doesn't matter because it's kind of it's not just boosting at 60. When you're boosting at 60, you're kind of boosting, that still is reaching all the way up into the hundreds with a little bit of that shelf.
Yeah. And I said earlier, I don't see a curve thing with this with your product, but I guess if we could see it, it'd be interesting to see how that curve actually works. Because the thing is, it always sounds like it's very broad. It doesn't sound like it's just going in narrow bandedly and pulling shit out. It feels like it's just generally. Oof.
Yeah. Well, and so I noticed on this one on the piano, it looks like you've turned on the high Q switch. Do you use that kind of narrower band for the mids often?
No, I don't think I did that intentionally. I think I was just pushing buttons real, quickly. Like I said, I move quickly.
Yeah.
And if there's no appreciable difference, I move on to something else. I don't know. I don't know. Can you tune drums?
No, not especially.
No, but what I mean by is like a long time ago, the one thing that used to drive me crazy is sitting there going, bing, 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 bing. And I'm like, I can't do that for a long time. It makes me crazy. Yeah. I have very good relative pitch, and I have very good relative thoughts about frequencies, but relative means after a while it wears off because it's relative.
Yeah.
And so you tainted with, if somebody walks in and sings another note, I'm done.
Yeah, you've lost your ears now.
Right.
Exactly, like our oral memory is not that long. Like we can only really remember like a tone or a pitch or something in our. It's hard to hold those in our ears or in our consciousness for much longer than like 5 or 6 seconds, something like that. It's really short, so you need to have that point of reference, and that's
right, and you lose it after a while. That's all I say. It goes away, and then there you stand on the cliff. You don't remember which direction you came in.
Yep, and then you're like, wait, I was gonna do something else, and then what was the next track I wanted to hit? Man, that's really funny. The how is getting the question in here, kind of asking how is a high frequency adding 60 hertz help? Doesn't make sense to me.
What?
So he's asking, so with something like this, like with a piano or say like with a vocal, something that doesn't even reach down to 60, how does adding 60 help those
Well,
sounds?
the answer to that question is I don't know either, but I heard a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and see that's the problem with today's. Everybody knows everything, but you know it from from your eyes, but you don't let your ears tell you what the answer is.
Yep.
And,
Well, and that's
that's
I mean,
I by the way, I scientifically I agree with you,
right.
and that's what I said when the guy from London came. He was doing some stuff like that. I was like, how does that make any sense? But when I heard it, I was like, yo, whatever you're doing.
Whatever it is, I love it. I love it. I'm like, man, this is it's a similar trick. Like this is one of the things that blew my mind when I got my hands on the first time I got to actually use a real Pultec on a session, and you run a lead vocal through a Pultec and you add 60 to it. You're like, what? Like where's this been all my life? Because it's not like it's mudding it up, or it's not making it extra thick, but it's adds this like chest presence to it that
It has a certain je ne sais quoi.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's why they at Power Station. That's why they had a Pultec on every channel.
Mm-hmm.
In that wall. I remember it very well. You would have, and it's like I thought about it. Remember, I was thinking about it today. I'm going, why would you want a Pultec on every channel? It's just gonna be a buildup of like that certain
one thing. Yeah.
But the difference is those were in analog boxes, and they all had different character.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the defense of that. But in a plug-in world, they are exactly what they're supposed to be.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
Yep, and that's always been when people have asked me, one of the common questions is like, all right, well, this looks like a beautiful 1084. How's it sound next to a real one? You're like, it sounds like a 1080, like one 1084 to another 1084. There's going to be a difference. There's always like module to unit to unit differences. And often those are wider than the differences from the plugin to the one that we modeled.
Right.
And we actually, I think I've lined up Will Shanks over here on the UA team. He kind of helps. He does all the sonic design, and he's the golden ears that we trust to help tune these plugins when they're in development. So what they do is they bring in multiple units. A lot of times we'll have a golden unit, but then we also have a couple others to evaluate next to. And the whole time they're comparing it, they're trying to match the golden unit, but they're also listening to the other ones to know, like, are we still are we all in the same realm?
Right. It's gonna be a hard gig.
It really is. It's like constantly listening, and it's funny. Like whenever I get to hang out with him at headquarters, before the lockdown stuff, he has one session loaded up with sound examples that he uses for basically every plugin. So he knows those sound examples so well that like he can hear the minute, the tiniest difference, like the little half dB bump at a different frequency. He can hear those differences from plugin to plugin, and from even as they're tuning it. It's really remarkable, and so that's a whole different type of gig compared to what you're doing. Nice, man. Well, so do you have any other kind of starting points or tips for people that as they're trying, if they're gonna kind of download and do a trial of a 1084, anything that we haven't really touched on that you think they should check out?
I think the biggest thing to do with the 1084, I think it's just to start turning knobs to see what it does.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure that if I really, really dug in there at certain places, it would not emulate an actual 1084. I don't know that for a fact, but at a certain point, it can't be 100%.
Yeah.
Right. So there's going to be some places where some combinations of things will make it sound not like that at all. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing. Yeah. But I'm not trying to find its flaw. I'm trying to find its usefulness, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And even to answering that thing before, it's like, I know that the bottom end of this thing it reminds me of the bottom end that I like.
Yeah.
And so I go for it, and I would use it because I think I'm using a 1084.
Mm-hmm.
And I may even rent one back. Well, I can get back from the guy who has mine actually, just so I can play with it back and forth. But that to me, that's counterproductive. That doesn't serve anything to say, oh, I'm like, here's this thing.
Yep.
You play with it. If it works for you, it's great. If it doesn't work for you, it may work for you in a way that doesn't work for me because I'm not looking for the same thing that other people are looking for sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the modern world.
Yeah.
I say that.
Well, and I guess the one area of, especially one of the key differences, right, of the 1084 that we haven't talked about yet is the top end. So a 1073 that we're all familiar with, you get a top end knob. You just get to decide you want more or less of it. But with the 1084, you can actually control what frequency it's at. When do you find yourself moving those frequencies around?
Well, that one I tried a couple of times, and if you notice, on most of the things I played you, I really didn't have very much. I didn't get there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't convinced. It wasn't really doing what I thought it was going to do for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't quite get there yet. But I got my bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and I got
You got your bottom, you got your mids rocking.
And once again, 7.2 is 7,000 hertz is something I used to use religiously.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of but the top end I was like between the I tried a couple of times, but it didn't do the sheen thing that I was expecting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And is that so like when you're looking for sheen, like you're kind of, is it like a glassiness or like an air thing? Like what are you typically trying to reach for?
I think air. And by the way, on this particular session, I even tried to put it on the master fader just to see if I could get away with that.
Uh-huh.
And it didn't do that. It didn't expand and open up and widen for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I took it off once again.
Yeah. What do you mind can we show people what we're trying to do there on the master and just maybe give them a chance to hear what you're hearing?
Sure. So let's see what I did. Ooh, ow. Ooh, wow.
So a little boost at 16, a little boost at 7, and a boost at 110 with a little Scotia 45 at the bottom.
Right. So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So like I said, it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And now just listening to you, maybe because it's the frequencies I picked, because I move fast. I just do things real fast, and I'm like, didn't work. Let's do something else.
Yeah. So let's for sake of science, let's see what you did here.
Okay.
We have the piano soloed up.
If I might, for me,
Mm-hmm.
it took away all the bottom.
Yeah.
It made everything sound like this small song.
It narrowed it, and it made it smaller in a weird way.
In a very weird way, exactly. So I could have sat there and dialed in and kept playing with it and trying to make things happen. But first of all, I don't live in the 110 world. I told that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my favorite place to live. So I was doing it because it made sense. I'm like, you got too much 60, try 110.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it didn't seem to work, and it seemed to actually cancel my bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that's possible. And the 16, I was thinking more like a mastering engineer. I want to do something, but I don't want to do too much. And somehow it didn't, none of them
It didn't open it up. Yeah, exactly. And this is, I hope people are taking the right point here of like, this isn't saying that the 1084 is a bad mix bus EQ to have. It's just not, it doesn't work in this scenario for the track. It's all about context, right? Of like,
right.
In this moment, like you got to try stuff. You got to say like, cool, I want more top end. Let me try this one out. And if it doesn't work, you have to always be honest and real with yourself of like, that's not giving me what I was looking for. Move it, move on to the next thing.
And I could keep on hunting, and I'm sure that at some point I would be able to make that be better or different. But like I said, if it didn't do it kind of quickly, then it defeats the purpose for me.
Yeah, you don't want to spend a half hour trying to force this one to work to give you what you want, when you can be like, all right, well, maybe a Pultec or a Massive Passive or a Curve Bender or something else. There's plenty of other EQs in your toolkit. And if you don't get it right away, then you gotta keep on moving and stay inspired and kind of stay in that zone, as opposed to like laboring a point and trying to force something to work.
Yeah, but I thought the sound of that box would do I thought it was going to be like, oh, this box will do it fine, but maybe the analog one would have did. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
You never know until you try.
you never know till you try, and
Mm-hmm.
and be free and feel free to try.
Yeah, that's kind of and so you were talking a little bit like you're obviously very busy with actual projects and you don't get a ton of time to play around. So how do you kind of integrate your exploration and playing around with new things? Do you integrate that into the sessions you're working on, or do you kind of dedicate time to it?
I don't have the time to dedicate to it.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally.
Yeah.
Between just trying to keep up with music that's out there. There's so many things to keep up with in life now.
Uh-huh.
There's so many things, all the different music that comes out, keeping up with what's going on in the industry, keeping up with the new shit that's coming out, and doing your work as well.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to, remain acceptable in the eyes of the people that hire you.
Yep.
Because, they just want a product. They don't really care about how you got there. They just want a product.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's you bring up a good point of like there's two sides. There's the side that you and I are on, hanging out and geeking out about plugins and different frequency. Like this side of it, like clients, labels, artists, and literally do not give a crap how you get to the result. All they care about is the result. They care about how it feels to them when they play back your mix. Did it make them more excited about their record?
Do they see money?
Exactly. Did they see this converting into more and more dollars for themselves?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good to keep that perspective in there, and then so it kind of just makes sense. Like your workflow, kind of pulling stuff up, trying stuff out. If it doesn't work, mute it, move on. Like keeping the flow of the mix kind of happening. I think is such an important point for people to keep in mind as they're working and playing around.
Keep in mind when you're working. Just to, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can always go back and do it again, and don't be afraid to leave. I use the word placeholders many times, and what that means is I'll put something that's not exactly it, but it kind of works for now, and it's good enough that, as we talked about earlier, I don't have to spend all my brain energy trying to find the right exact one, because then I lose the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want to lose the big picture.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's so important. You gotta stay in context. So do you find, I know we've been kind of soloing a few things up, but when you're working, do you typically kind of solo stuff for a moment to check out what it is and then keep going? Or do you just always keep stuff in context?
Well, I'll kind of keep things in context, and I'll solo in context for a moment or two.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's really a problem, I don't spend a lot of time listening to it as a disjointed entity.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole package usually comes to me as an entity. That is the package. That is the entity.
Yeah.
And you want to kind of keep that, cohesive. And then, like there's certain things inside you might not hear, you want to fix or whatever, but you can't really, you can do whatever you want to do, but I don't spend a lot of time working solo with it, because that's the sure way for me to end up with like a bunch of stuff that doesn't fit anymore.
Uh-huh. Talk about a way to make it so that your piano and your guitars do not coexist anymore, is to work on your pianos and then work on your guitars and then try to add them back together. And you're like, oh, wait a second. You have to end up having to do the work twice in a way to really make it work.
So, when I did that record with Jay-Z, the 444 record,
mm-hmm.
It was a big deal. Me and Jay, we've done a lot of records together, but I haven't been with him in years. And I was like, oh, this is exciting. I'm going to come in there and be like, Jimmy, and I'm going to show, and so I sat and I worked on one of the records. I forgot which one, but I sat there. I said, I'm going to make this kick so mighty. I'm going to make it so mighty, because I'm like, it's got to be, because, youthful, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I made the kick so mighty. And I swear to you, the next day, Jay came in and he just listened. And all he said was, he goes, the kick don't sound like it's a part of the record. And he said it just like that. And I just looked at him like, damn. And that's because I worked so hard on the damn kick to make it so important.
Uh-huh.
And right away, he was like, no, it's fucking the record up.
Yeah.
I took all that shit off.
Yeah. You literally take off. He's like, there it is. That's what I wanted.
It's actually the way he delivered it. That's what made it so poignant. He wasn't like all excited. He just quietly just said, oh. And I was like, oh shit.
Damn. He called it out. Like he heard it instantly. Right. And that's, I mean, it's such a perspective thing of like, you know, when an artist gets to hear their mix for the first, you know, they hear that first mix from you, like they've been living with that record potentially for weeks, months, years, even sometimes. Right. And like,
Yeah.
they have a
Yeah.
concept of how they want it to feel and how to have it come back out. And if, you know, if what they hear doesn't hit there, they, you know, there's gotta be no ego about it. It's not, you know, you probably did make I bet that kick, if you spent that much time making that kick, I'm sure it was a fucking amazing kick, but it's not
Yeah,
right for the record.
You had no perspective to the record.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Nice. Well, man, Jimmy, it's been super fun hanging out. Anything that we didn't get to touch on that you wanted to you know, let people know about, you know, when it comes to mixing or just, you know, music in general?
I wanted to have a quick overview on your Luna thing, which I've touched for, you know, I haven't had enough time to really dig into it on all my machines, but the one machine I did have for a quick minute just to see how it worked, because we're all dying to see this thing, you know, and it's like, and the sound of it is kind of really cool. I have to say that it sounds different than other DAWs. We won't say the word better or worse. We're not doing that, you know.
It's just its own. It's got its own sound.
It's got its own sound. With that much, I would definitely say, you know, and it happens to be a sound I like. It's warm and reminds me, you know, that.
Here, let me. I can share my screen with you. Turn the tables here a little bit. So yeah, I mean that's you know, we've been geeking out here about the 1084, but the cool thing, one of the cool unique advantages about Luna is the fact that now you have Neve summing also built into the mixer engine.
That's the thing, and that summing thing I was putting on every track kind of thing.
Yeah, and
it's got a great warmth to it, thing to it.
And it's a much more subtle effect. So you're getting the Neve style gain stage and kind of the sound and the glue that it can add. But it can do it in much, you know, in a very, you can be subtle, or you can be, you know, you can go overboard with it really easily. But that's kind of what this one control here, the HR, it's short for headroom. So if you go to the right, you're kind of cranking down the headroom, and you're starving it and really pushing the edge of it and get this crazy, you know, similar to what you heard on the on that lead vocal track, right? Where you can just get that that real grit. But then you can also do the opposite. You can really clean it up and give yourself a lot of headroom going into it. But you know, the really unique thing here is, yeah, man, this is built into the mixing engine of Luna. So it's not like you have to load up another plugin, and then, as you mentioned, when you put it on multiple buses, you know, you can end up with a session where you've got like 8, 9, 10 sub buses that all have Neve summing, and then the master with Neve summing. You get to be it gives you kind of the chance to be more refined with it in a way, where you're like, use it subtly, you know, maybe you drive the drums, you know, kind of hard, but then on the piano and the guitars you kind of make it nice and soft, and you just get a tiny bit of that color. But yeah, it lets you be a bit of a connoisseur when it comes to how much saturation you're applying to the overall mix. And then of course, make sure you definitely don't sleep on this high impedance low impedance switch. This honestly, this shifts the tone of it around massively. The low impedance one, it kind of just says whoop. It kind of gives you this extra bottom, this extra top. There's also a little bit of extra gain to go along with it, so it's kind of hard to give it a fair A/B every time you go between. It's really hard when you're A/Bing between high and low. You're just like, yeah, low sounds better. It's like 2 dB louder, so of course it sounds better. But it does have a tone thing too, where the bottom end and the thickness that you can get from that is incredible. So yeah, so the Neve summing built in, and the other one I'm sure you've noticed is the tape, being able to kind of insert.
Yes, that was the other guy.
So yeah, when when it comes to, if you want your records to have a classic like analog sound, to have this as like your starting blocks, like this is it's a huge head start, and it does give it, you know, rather than just being ones and zeros, it kind of it gives it that fuzziness that we haven't had inside the box without, you know, kind of going nuts with a lot of plugins.
Right.
But yeah, otherwise, man, like I'm really curious as you dive more and more into Luna, you're gonna feel pretty much at home. Like it's a lot of Pro Tools shortcuts, you know, like R and T and E, all the fading. You know, it's basically like you're on the Smart Tool in Pro Tools. You kind of have the Smart Tool style editing with trims and fades and being able to change around the fade types. But the key difference, one of the biggest things you're gonna notice as you're getting more and more into Luna, is in the file menu. There's no save. You don't have to hit Command S at all anymore, because Luna is constantly saved. It's a database system, so every move that you make in Luna is automatically saved. So even if you close out of it, if it crashes, if anything happens, there's no like, oh man, did I just lose 5 or 10 minutes of work? It's just it's constantly there and saved. Which is that's been a really a good adjustment for the better. But I've had to like unlearn my Command S, just like every time I do something in Pro Tools, and then Command S, do something, Command S, and yeah, trying to think of other big highlight things for it. It's the routing. For you coming from Pro Tools as well, you'll notice like you probably use groups a lot, right? For kind of grouping together tracks for mixes and edits.
I'm supposed to, and I should, but I don't really. But I could. I know how I do. I know how to do it.
Well, it's different in Luna. So the way that we handle groups in Luna is it's what we call selection grouping. So like you'll even see when you hit Command G, you're turning on and off the selection grouping, and so it's always contextual. So it's based on whatever is selected. As opposed to having like a permanent group, like instead of having vocal A or instruments or all your different groups, all you do is select the tracks that you want to group together, and then boom, those controls are now all rocking together, just in a more contextual kind of control. What anything else that you curious about when it comes to Luna?
Oh no, because I started playing and like I said, I was going to transfer to another machine, and it too much energy. So I'm going to go back to the one I have.
Yep.
And everything I remembered about it, it's funny, the save thing. I thought it was because it was a model. I thought it was because it was like a demo model. It didn't save. I didn't.
It was a demo limitation that we
yeah.
So
I didn't get into that yet. I was like, they'll.
Yeah, no, it's it's constantly saved, which is it's been a bit of a blessing when things have if they ever crash or if you just kind of work on stuff. And it also allows you to undo. You can undo really far back. Like there's some things that kind of reset the undo history, but in theory you can kind of undo all the way back to the creation of a session if you wanted to.
That's amazing.
Which is nuts.
Amazing.
Yeah, man. Well, Jimmy, man, dude, it's been so much fun hanging out with you, man, and kind of picking your brain around the 1084 and just in general kind of geeking out around EQs, and so I really appreciate you giving us an inside look into the session. And just a couple people were still asking what was the name of the artist again? Bowen.
Beaubowen.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And the other artist I didn't get to was Levin Colley, who was from California on Interscope, and his album just dropped, and we spent a lot of time on stuff, and that's a really nice album as well.
Nice, awesome, man. Well, dude, hope you stay safe, stay indoors, keep washing your hands, and keeping busy with music projects, and it's been really fun hanging out with you. And if people want to follow you on social media, where should they find you?
Senator Jimmy D.
Nice.
On Instagram.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Jimmy, man, thanks a lot. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. And thanks again also for all, I know you've contributed lots of presets, both for the 1084, but also a lot of UAD plugins. So both me and all of our users, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for giving us the inspiration and kind of some cool jumping off points that are always fun to work from.
Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy. And for everybody watching, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back for another office hours. We got 2 lined up for tomorrow. We've got Damian Taylor and Daryl Thorpe are joining us tomorrow. Yeah,
say hey to Damian for me, man.
Oh, I will, dude. This is so funny. It's kind of like a chain telephone game of like, talk to Joe. Joe's like, hey, say what's up to Jimmy. Jimmy says what's up to. Yep,
absolutely.
That's great. Right, it's a small little world that we're connecting all together here via Zoom and UAD stuff. So yeah, guys, tune in tomorrow. We'll be back here for more fun and kind of geeking out around the 1084. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.
All right.